Hello everyone, I'll go over another amazing game from the US Chess Championship we just started yesterday from round 1, and this is a game between Yaroslav Zherebukh and Wesley So. And Wesley is probably with Hikaru Nakamura the second favorite for the title of the US Champion. Of course, I think Fabiano Caruana is the biggest favorite because he is in top form at the moment. He won the Candidates Tournament, he's going to be challenging Magnus for the title, and he also won the Grenke Chess Classic convincingly, so I don't think anybody can match him at the moment. And he drew his game in round 1, but it was a fighting draw. And in this round 1, Yaroslav and Wesley So played a fighting game as well. Zherebukh opened with pawn to e4, and Wesley played the Sicilian Defense. And I'm not sure how often he plays the Sicilian, but I think he's more known for his solid repertoire than for the Sicilian. After knight to f3, d6, we have bishop to b5 check by Zherebukh, the Canal-Sokolsky attack, or the Rossolimo attack as it's also known. And this avoids many open Sicilian lines and exits most of the main line theory in the Najdorf or something else with the move d4. So after d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, the position could go into numerous theoretical variations, but after bishop to b5 there's a lot less theory. And now Wesley plays knight to d7. The other possibility is bishop to d7, covering the check. That's the most common move, and the line would go like this after castles. You can see that black's position is perfectly solid, but he has a fighting chance and he has a much stronger center, so I would say this is favorable for black, and bishop to d7 is the most common move for a reason, but knight to d7 is good as well, and it just enters a completely different position. And from this move, from knight to d7, white will most commonly reply with pawn to d4, opening up the center, and after knight to f6, knight to c3, c takes d4, queen takes d4. This is the most common continuation. The other line that white could go for is castles on move 4, and after a6, chasing the bishop away, bishop takes d7, bishop takes d7, and once again d4, opening up black's strong central structure with e7, d6, and c5. But in this position, Yaroslav Zherebukh went for a very uncommon move, which there was only one game with this move played, and it was from 2006, I think. It was also a Grandmaster game, but since it's only been played once, it's a very uncommon idea, and I think Wesley must have been surprised by this move. Zherebukh played bishop to a4, and this move is preparing to transfer the bishop to b3. It's moving in advance of a6, which is a very common idea in this position, and it's leaving the push d4 or castling for later on. And it's not a bad move. The position is similarly equal as if he had played d4 or castles here. So bishop to a4 is okay, but it's a surprising continuation. Wesley continues with knight to f6, Zherebukh castles, a6, and now you can see that the bishop doesn't have to move, it's moved already, c4, and Zherebukh exploits the fact that Wesley allowed him to create a Morozzi bind in the position, that being the pawns on e4 and c4, which are preventing black from breaking in the center with the thematic move in the Sicilian, the move d5. So the Morozzi bind, which is common in the Kramnik variation of the Sicilian, the Khan variation, and many positions where white actually plays f3, is a very solid way for white to fight the Sicilian and to slow black down in his central plans. And usually after the Morozzi bind, black will have to play e6, bishop e7, or g6, bishop g7, and develop that way. So this is a very solid way for white to play. Wesley goes for fianchettoing his kingside bishop with g6, knight to c3, bishop to g7, d3, and now Wesley castles. And you can see that the position is okay for both sides. It's not the open Sicilian, so the pawns haven't been exchanged. Usually you will see an exchange of the d pawn for the c pawn, which gives black a central pawn majority and the central structural advantage, but in this variation black doesn't have that, and white has avoided giving black his biggest advantage in the Sicilian, that being more central pawns. And the position is equal, both sides have something to play for. Of course, black is aiming to play rook to b8, break with b5 and advance on the queen side, and white will most likely in many variations play knight to d2, f4, f5, and open up the position that way. And usually you always break on the side where your pawn chain is going, so since black's pawn chain is going towards the queen side, his first pawn break is here on b4, and white's first pawn break is here on f5. So the game continues with h3 from Zherebukh, b6. He can't play b5 yet, but this is preparing to fianchetto the queenside bishop as well. Rook to b1, bishop to b7, bishop to g5, an active move, but you could argue that it's a waste of time because he's never really going to take the knight. h6, bishop e3, queen to c7, now attacking, now developing his last piece, connecting the rooks, queen to d2, attacking the h6 pawn, and king to h7, defending. And from this position on, Zherebukh plays actively and transfers his attack to Wesley's portion of the board with b4, breaking up on the queen side. Rook a to c8, rook f to c1, e6, solidifying the center and not giving white the option to jump into d5. Knight to e2, rook f to d8, knight to g3, a lot of maneuvering since it's a closed position, and you can see immediately that it doesn't resemble any normal open Sicilians. It's a maneuvering game more similar to the Spanish or the Italian, but it's still interesting, and you will see fireworks later on. Bishop to a8, preparing to create a battery of queen and bishop on the long diagonal, and this idea is very common in some Slav positions on the opposite side, where white will play bishop to c1 and queen to d2. I'm sorry, bishop to b1, queen to c2. Now a3 by Zherebukh, solidifying his queenside pawn structure. Knight to b8, preparing to enter the c6 square and to fight for d4. This is a very good positional idea by Wesley So, and this is definitely a grandmaster maneuver, which not many lower rated players would think of. Now knight to h2, Zherebukh is fighting for g4 and trying to evict the knight from f6 or exchange, because this knight is definitely more active than the f3 knight for white. Knight to c6, f4, and now knight to d4. And in this position, of course, the knight can be taken, but that wouldn't give white anything. If bishop takes d4, cd4, knight f3, e5, black is defending, of course, so that would be okay. And after knight to d4, the best move for white was queen to d1, just transferring the queen to the king side and preparing to play g4 and to be able to recapture with the queen afterwards. This would have been the most active move, and the continuation would go like this probably. This would be the best line, and you can see that white is very active. Once again, a lot of maneuvering, but black doesn't have anything in the position. But after knight to d4, Zherebukh made a mistake, and he played a move which is very passive and which gave Wesley all he wanted in the position. Now, if you consider what the knight is doing on d4, it's actually supporting the b5 break, which Wesley had to prepare to fianchetto the bishop and transfer it to a8. But now with the knight on d4, b5 is a possibility. And Zherebukh played rook to f1, which, first of all, is a waste of tempo. He is moving the rook for the third time, castling, getting it to c1 and now back to f1. So a definite mistake, a waste of tempo. And secondly, it doesn't do anything about the b5 break. So Wesley simply plays b5. And now after b5, cb5, ab5, bishop to d1, he has to retreat the bishop. It was attacked, and now queen to a7, attacking the a3 pawn, and you can see immediately that black now has the edge. He has more attacking opportunities on the queen side, and the king side is locked. And now white's knight on h2 actually looks useless. The knight on g3 doesn't have any squares. And the bishops are much worse than black's bishops for the moment. But firstly, he has to play rook to a1, defending the a3 pawn. And now c takes b4, queen takes b4, and knight to d7. Now preparing to get the second knight to the c5 square, the most active square. And note, of course, that the knight is defended by the bishop and by the queen, so it can't be taken. King to h1, another mistake, another waste of tempo, and this, of course, is getting the king out of the checking squares from the stare of the queen on the diagonal, but it's too much of a waste of time. What white should have played after knight to d7 is simply rook to a2, trying to double the rooks, activating on the second rank and getting rid of the possibility of the black knight ever jumping to c2. But after king to h1, that's exactly what Wesley does. He exploits this possibility immediately, and he plays a marvelous tactical move which just gets a winning position immediately. He plays knight to c2, and now, of course, you can see that this is uncovering the bishop towards the black queen. So the black queen is hanging, but the white queen is hanging as well. And the most important thing is that the bishop is staring at a1 on the rook. So there's a lot of stuff hanging in this position. Now let's just cover one possibility. The best move in this position for white was to take the knight, I'm sorry, on c2. And after bishop takes c2, of course this bishop is hanging as well, so queen takes e3. And after rook to f3, evicting the queen, queen to c5, the position would be much better for black. Of course, the bishop is hanging. The queens would either have to get exchange or he would have to play rook a2. And after rook to after rook to f2, f5 and rook to f1, you can see that black has a lot of initiative. But So taking the bishop, the knight was best, and letting black capture the dark squared bishop. This would be the lesser evil move. But after knight to c2, Zherebukh actually decided to grab the queen, and after bishop takes f7, knight takes b4, you can see immediately that the rook is hanging as well, so rook to b1 is another waste of tempo, and now knight takes d3. Black goes a pawn up temporarily with a completely winning position, and now after rook takes b5, getting the pawn back, simply bishop to c6, and after the rook retreats, rook to a8 wins a pawn back, and black will be a whole, clear, healthy pawn up, and white will have absolutely nothing at the position. After bishop to e3, rook takes a3, you can see that all of black's pieces are more active than any of white's pieces. The knights look absolutely ridiculous, the bishops are passive on the first and third rank, while at the same time black's bishops are staring at the white king, and on the long diagonal, the knight is a monster, an octopus knight. On the d3 square, you can see that it's controlling the entire board, and the other knight could jump into the game easily as well. So black's pieces are more active, black's position is more active, black's king is safer, and black has an extra pawn. So definitely a very nice winning maneuver, which was allowed with this move, knight to c2. And of course, had Zherebukh prevented that with rook to a2, none of that would have happened. But after this position, after rook takes b5, rook a8, bishop e3, rook takes a3, Zherebukh tries bishop to f3, solidifying now h5, attacking on the king side as well, knight to e2, knight 3 to c5, and now that forces an exchange. He has to trade pieces, e5, and now in this position, of course, Wesley could play d5, because rook f to c1 doesn't win a piece. He would be able to play bishop to f8, defending the knight and actually putting the bishop to a much more active diagonal, but he decides after e5 to play bishop to a4, not doing any of that. E takes d6, rook takes d6, rook bc1, knight to b3, defending with tempo. Of course, removing the knight and attacking the rook. Rook to c7, seemingly entering black's position and attacking something, but Wesley simply plays knight to d2, not bothering with defending that. Of course, it's not with check, so Zherebukh has to defend the rook first. Rook to e1, and now rook to d7, initiating an exchange. Rook takes d7, bishop takes d7, rook to d1, and now the second winning move by Wesley. Rook to a2, knight to c1, and now rook to a1, pinning the knight to the rook and definitely initiating an exchange. And now in this position, if rook takes d2, rook c1 would be with check, so the bishop isn't hanging. So after rook to a1, Zherebukh had to exchange more pieces. He played knight to d3, and now rook d1 check, bishop d1, knight to e4, knight to f3, bishop to b5, attacking the knight, once again trying to trade pieces, knight f to e1, h4 closing down white's king, king to h2, bishop to c3, now definitely forcing a trade, bishop c2, bishop d2, knight f3, bishop takes d3, bishop takes d3, and now bishop takes f4 check, going a second pawn up with a completely winning position. Of course, white could capture the h4 pawn, but it's check now, so he has to move the king first. King to g1, bishop to e3 check, another tempo, king to f1, knight to g3 check, king to e1, and king to g7. And in this position, Zherebukh resigned, gave up, and Wesley So won his first round of the US Championship. And I think it's really important, because he started this year pretty passively and badly and had some bad results. Of course, he had a bad performance at the candidates tournament, and the whole year hadn't been that successful for him, even though many people expected him to do really well and perhaps even win the candidates. But I think this is a major thing for him, that he managed to win in the first round with the black pieces. And even though Zherebukh is 150 points lower rated, it's still a strong grandmaster and a very important victory. And I have to say, I'm looking forward to seeing Wesley's games, and the one today first of all. Okay, everybody, thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked this aggressive Sicilian by Wesley So in round 1 of the US Championship. And stay tuned for more chess. I'm going to be covering the US Championship, some more theoretical openings, and more chess from the old masters. Thanks very much. Bye.